It feels like it's been a long time, probably about 4 months. After so many complications, tests, and doctor visits, the day once again started with bad news. The bleeding returned, and this time it was not just that, there was a miscarriage. The very thing we feared most had happened. In the morning, I could not hold my tears, and I saw her break down. Her pain was far worse than mine. Another life was forming inside her, but today that hope came to an end. She was not crying, just sitting quietly in the corner of the room, her shadi's pallu covering her face, staring down at the ground. Even though my father is elderly, he remained calm. He quickly booked an ambulance and told us to get ready, as it would arrive by 6:15. Meanwhile, my mother had already taken a bath and tied a bit of sacred earth from the deity's idol into the corner of her shadi, trying to bring us strength. As soon as the ambulance arrived, the three of us left. We laid her down on the stretcher and the ambulance sped off, faster than our troubled minds could comprehend. Both of us were in tears. It felt like we had lost, that all our efforts over the past few months had come to and nothing. But even then, my mother tried to encourage us, doing her best to care for us, offering water again and again, trying to feed us. She kept wiping our faces. Outside it was unbearably hot. We had not realized how much so until we reached the nursing home. Once we arrived, the heat seemed insignificant. We rushed to the emergency room, and two attendants came immediately to take her inside. My mother wanted to go with them, but they did not allow her. She kept looking up at the deity's image, praying silently, while I could not take my eyes off my wife's feet on the stretcher. I don't know why, but it felt like she had given up. Her body seemed still, lifeless, like she had already passed away inside. It was noon by the time we realized how long we had been waiting. They had taken her in long ago, but no one had called for us yet. None of us had eaten anything since morning. And my father kept calling me intermittently. But what could I say? I did not know anything myself. My mother had not taken her blood pressure medicine in the morning, and I could tell her from her face that she was not feeling well. But she kept drinking water and trying to stay calm, not letting anyone know she was not okay. Inside the nursing home, life seemed to be moving forward as usual. Despite the personal tragedy that engulfed us, the routine of the place was unwavering, indifferent to the emotional storm that its patients and their families faced. I was not the only one there. The halls were filled with families like ours, each carrying their own burden of worry and grief. Nurses moved through the corridors, their faces calm, their movements efficient. For them, it was just another day at work, ushering the patients in and out of rooms, administering medication, adjusting four drips, checking charts. The sound of the nurses' shoes clicking against the floor, the soft beep of monitors, and the murmur of the doctors giving instruction filled the air. To them, this was just routine, part of the daily grind in the place where life and death often bruised soldiers. I saw attendants pushing elderly patients in wheelchairs, some wrapped in blankets despite the heat outside. A young doctor, barely out of medical school, rushed past me, his stethoscope bouncing on his chest as he hurried to attend a new case. In another corner, a nurse comforted a family whose relative had just been taken into surgery, offering a few kinds of words before moving on to her next task. In the waiting room, people sat quietly, most staring blankly at their phones or reading old magazine as they waited for news, any news. The expressions on their faces were a mix of hope and exhaustion. Some had been here for hours, others for days. Yet, the staff moved with a mechanical precision, accustomed to the ebb and flow of emotions that defined their workspace. There were families there hoping for a miracle, their anxious whispers filling the space between the periodic announcements over the loudspeaker. Others, like us, were there to endure the hard truth, grasping at every little bit of information the doctors provided. I remember one man pacing the length of the corridor, his hands wringing the handle of a plastic bag, lost in his own world of worry. Every few minutes he had stopped and glanced towards the doors, waiting for news, just like we were. In the middle of this, a group of interns was huddled near the emergency room, learning the ropes from their seniors. Their voices were hushed but urgent, discussing cases as they navigated the complexity of their new responsibilities. For them, the day was full of learning another step in becoming the doctors they aspired to be. But for the patients and the families, this place was the center of their universe, where life altering news was delivered, where futures were decided. The cafeteria nearby had a mix of staff and family members. Some were grabbing a quick bite while others stared into their cups of tea, lost in their own thoughts. I had not eaten since morning, but my appetite had vanished. The smell of food felt almost wrong amidst all this headache, the heartaches. Still, for the staff, eating between shifts was just part of the routine. They had to keep going, just like the rest of us. Amid this carefully maintained rhythm, it was easy to feel like just another case, another number in a long line of patients. The daily grind of the nursing home continued. Time had slowed down for me, but for the staff, it marched on at its usual pace. As we sat there waiting for news, I realized that this place had seen countless moments like ours. Families celebrating recoveries, grieving losses, or simply trying to hold on for one more day. The world within the nursing home was structured around efficiency and duty, a place where emotions ran high for some, but where others had learned to com- compartmentalize the pain and grief they witnessed every day. While my world was crumbling, the nursing home was running like clockwork, offering its routine comforts and cold realities in equal measure. Suddenly, there was an announcement. Shangita Kharami, family of Shangita Kharami, please come to the inquiry desk. My mother and I ran to the counter. They handed us a yellow card. I thought we might finally get to see her, ask about her condition, whether the tumor in the fallopian tube had ruptured, or if the baby has truly lost. What we feared had happened. The doctor confirmed after the ultrasound and blood test that there was nothing more to be done. Our fifth member, who had not yet entered this world, was gone before we ever got to meet them. Talking to the doctor, my mind kept wandering to Shangita. What was she going through? How would she deal with this grief? Surrounded by strangers in the operating room, the doctor said they were preparing for the procedure to clean her womb. I slowly walked back downstairs and found my mother arguing with the lift operator because they would not let her up without a pass. She was desperate to see her daughter-in-law, but I had to calm her down, telling her to rest and eat something. She reluctantly agreed and started patting my head, trying to comfort me, even though I knew she was breaking down inside. Afternoon had I had turned into evening, and the blistering heat had finally subsided a bit. The nursing home was still crowded. Some people were leaving with good news, while others, like us, were breaking down inside, quietly losing their battle. Another announcement called us back to the inquiry desk. They informed us that the procedure was done and she would be brought down in 15 minutes. I rushed to complete the paperwork. When I reached the lift, I saw her sitting in a wheelchair, wearing a pale chudidar, her hair tied back in a loose rubber band. She was sitting still, staring at the floor. I stood behind her, but there was no reaction. I began to wheel her towards the front gate. I did not know what to say to her. My mother never taught me how to comfort someone during their darkest time. I handed her a bottle of water. She took it but just held it close to her stomach, pressing it against herself. I could sense she was still holding on to the slight weight that had been there inside her for the first 4 months, now gone. I asked her softly if she wanted to have some ice cream. She did not respond. I was not crying anymore, but fear gripped me. I did not know how to comfort her. Women often bottle up their pain, keeping it deep inside, and I was struggling to figure out how to reach her. Meanwhile, I could not find my mother. I kept calling her, but she was not answering. The car had arrived, but I did not know where she had gone. Suddenly, a cool breeze started blowing, and I looked up to see white clouds gathering over the nursing home. As we got into the ambulance, the rain began to fall. Just then, my mother appeared, holding a small plastic bottle of hot tea and 3 little cups. I did not know what to say. We were all drenched in the rain. The ambulance driver started the engine, and my mother held her hand tightly. She took the cup from me and offered it to my wife, arguing her to drink some tea. She did not say anything but held on to the cup. Outside, the rain poured down in torrents. The ambulance moved slowly, stuck it in the 8 p.m. office rush. I asked the driver to turn off the siren, saying, "We will go slowly." Suddenly, the ambulance came to a halt as a black cat crossed our path. I won't believe in such superstitions, but at that moment, it felt like everything in the world was conspiring against us. I was willing to believe anything just to find a way to break this silence, to hear Shangita speak again. After a 40-minute drive, we finally reached home. The entire neighborhood was standing outside. Some had come to show support, while others were simply curious. It reminded me of 2 years ago when the same neighbors had gathered to welcome her as a new bride, with ululations and conch shells. The day I first brought her home after our marriage was filled with celebration and joy. I remembered it so vividly. The entire neighborhood had gathered outside to greet us, and the atmosphere was electric with excitement. Women stood at the entrance with conch shells, their ululations echoing through the narrow lanes. My mother had arranged for a small welcome ceremony, and as we stepped out of the car, the sound of shank filled the air. The ladies from our neighborhood had lined up to shower blessings on her, each offering a kind word, a smile, a pat on her head. She wore a bright red sari, her hands adorned with the intricate designs of mehendi, and her face was glowing despite the tears that streamed down her cheeks. Those tears were not of sorrow, though. They were the bittersweet tears of leaving her father's home, but mixed with the anticipation of starting a new life in our hours. I remember the way she held on to me, her hands shaking a little as she tried to smile through the tears, looking at all the faces that were there welcome to her. There was music, laughter, and clatter. The house was decorated with marigold garlands, and everyone had come to celebrate the arrival of the new bride. That day she walked in with her head slightly bowed, blushing as all eyes were on her. But her spirit was full of hope. The entire neighborhood had gathered not just to see the new bride but to be the part of this new beginning in our lives. Every step she took into the house felt like a promise of a future filled with love, laughter, and the togetherness. As she crossed the threshold, my mother blessed her, holding her hand tightly as if to say, "You are home now, Betty." But today, the same girl was returning, and yet the scenario could not have been more different. The same neighbors stood outside, but this time their faces were somber. The ululations and conch sounds were replaced by a heavy silence. Instead of the vibrant red sari, she wore a pale churidar, her hair loosely tied back, her face drained of all color, her step, which once carried the weight of hope and excitement, now seemed heavy with grief and loss. The same eyes that had once been filled with curiosity and admiration were now downcast, filled with pity and sorrow. Where there had been music and celebration, there was now only the sound of our footsteps on the wet ground and the occasional murmurs of hushed conversation. As she stepped out of the ambulance, she felt like the air itself had shifted. The rain had just stopped, and under the dim streetlights, everything seemed washed out, as if even the world around us was mourning alongside us. I saw her lift her face briefly, just for a moment, looking at the same people who had once cheered for her arrival. But this time she could not hold it together. The pain she had been burying deep within her came rushing out, and all the tears she had been suppressing began to pour uncontrollably. The strength she had held on to for so long crumbled as she collapsed into my mother's arm, sobbing deeply. The contrast was striking. The same people, the same place, but the joy and the celebration of that first day had been replaced by silence and heartache. It was as if life had come full circle, but not in the way we had imagined. That day the people had gathered to witness a new beginning, and today they stood witness to our grief, unsure of what to say, how to comfort. They had once come to bless our union, and now they came to offer their condolences, though no words could fill the void we felt inside ourselves. It was as if life itself had played a cruel trick on us. The house, which had once welcomed her with warmth and joy, now seemed cold and distant. The people who had once been part of our happiest memories were now silent observers of our deepest pain. But even in that moment, amidst all the sorrow, there was something profound. My mother's embrace was not just an act of comfort, but a reminder that no matter how dark things seemed, we were not alone. We had each other, and though the circumstances had changed, the love and support that surrounded us had not. It was just quieter, more subdued, but still present, like the faint echoes of that first joyous day. Today, that same bride had returned with a pale face and a heavy heart. Back then, she had cried while leaving her father's home, but the excitement of starting a new life had lifted her spirit. Today, the same girl was silent, as was the crowd. As she got out of the car, she lifted her face for the first time. The rain had stopped, and under the streetlight, she looked at all people who had once celebrated her arrival. But today she could not hold it in anymore. All the tears she had been suppressing came pouring out as she clung to my mother and broke down in sobs. I don't know what to do next. I don't know how to make this right. But I do know that one mother can always understand the pain of another. And in that moment, it was my mother who knew exactly what to do. Because only a mother can console another mother's grief. That's all.